Hi, I'm Paul Guppy. I'm Vice President for the Washington Policy Center, and this is our regular weekly update of what is happening in the state capitol and what important bills are passing, and in this particular case, what court action is going to affect the lives of all of us in this state. So, first of all, we are in week 11 of the legislative session. For those keeping count, that is the 76th legislative day today, out of a scheduled 105-day session. So we're well past the halfway point of the legislative session. The couple of thousand bills that were introduced at the beginning have now been narrowed down to a few hundred. And the next cutoff date that the legislature is shooting for is March 29th. And that is the date that bills that have been passed in the opposite house have to pass the committee in the next house. And that applies to policy bills. It does not apply to revenue bills. And then the transportation budget is on a separate track, and there's information about that will be coming out next week. So for this week, the big news is the state Supreme Court's long-awaited ruling on the state income tax case. In 2021, the Democrats passed and Governor Inslee signed a bill that they call a capital gains tax. They have argued all along that it is not an income tax, which would be forbidden under our state constitution. Because it's a graduated tax, it only applies to a very narrow segment of people. Of course, that is the political game for the Democrats. They designed it that way, so only 0.5% of taxpayers will have to pay this tax. It's a 7% tax on capital gains profits or of above $250,000 in any 1 year, right around there. So it's pitched to very wealthy people, and that is for populist reasons, because a state income tax is highly unpopular in our state. It's been voted down 10 times. It's kind of the third rail of state politics. Nobody running for public office of any political party, except maybe in the most radical Seattle district, is going to come out in favor of a state income tax. So they passed this bill. It was challenged in the court. And early Friday morning, the Supreme Court issued their ruling, which is a little twisted. And their argument is that it's not an income tax. This is an excise tax on the activity of selling stocks and bonds or other assets and realizing a gain from that. So they upheld the tax. The decision itself is convoluted and kind of nonsensical. They also face problems with their federal commerce clause about interstate commerce. They explained that away. So a lot of people are surprised and shocked by the logic of this. The Democratic base is excited. Governor Inslee put out a press release celebrating the fact that an income tax had been upheld by the court, and he's moving forward from there. The other aspect of the decision, which is surprising, is that the court overturned 100 years of their own precedents. They had ruled in the past that a tax like this was unconstitutional, and then snap, on Friday morning, it was constitutional. And they seem to have no embarrassment about overturning their own rulings from the past. And it also goes against, I looked this up to check, the State Department of Commerce, in trying to recruit businesses and people to move to our state, has a talking point which says there is no income tax in Washington state. And that's just not true anymore. As Mike Gallagher, our president, pointed out, this decision is a big win for Texas, Florida, Tennessee, and other states that do not have income taxes. And we're going to start to see that effect over the next couple of years. As everyone knows, it doesn't take much for high wealth individuals to establish residency in another state. And in fact, the IRS defines residency as 180 days living in another state. That's not even a full year. So we expect that some people will do that, or maybe they'll just move away altogether. But the main thing about our analysis is we wondered, how did the court get to this kind of bizarre result? Because you don't even have to be a lawyer to read the Constitution and realize that this income tax bill is unconstitutional. And we think that part of the problem is that we have not had much choice in our democracy when it comes to the Supreme Court. So 3 justices of the 9 ran for re-election in 2022, and all 3 of them faced no opponent at all. So even if these justices who are elected statewide, if they had not raised a single dollar, if they had done no campaigning at all, their name appeared on the ballot and there was no other alternative for voters to consider. So those 3 just cruised to re-election. This sends a pretty strong signal to the Supreme Court that they feel safe And I think that's why they went ahead and did this. Moving forward, we'll see what happens next. Our biggest concern as the policy center is that Washington State can no longer claim that it's a no income tax state. So we've lost that benefit, but we also think that will have implications for everyone in our state, because once the Democrats get this tax in place, and again, they're celebrating, they've already spent all the revenue that they expect from this tax in the next budget. They will certainly begin to lower the threshold at which the tax applies, expanding it to more people. They've just enacted a new payroll tax, which goes into effect this year. So we think they will follow this trend, and that the income tax will soon begin to apply to, at some point anyway, to just ordinary working people, middle income people. We think that'll be the pattern in the future. Next, more on budget news, is on Monday, the State Economic and Revenue Forecast Council put out their latest revenue numbers on how much the state can expect to collect in taxes over the next 2-year budget period. And then they have a 4-year outlook beyond that. Revenue is up, as you would expect. It's not as up as much as the Democrats had expected, so they're kind of lamenting that. But as Jason Mercier on our staff pointed out, he said a slowing of an increase is still an increase. So revenue will be up from about $64 billion to around $69 billion. That's expected. The budget before that increased by 20%. So the budget that's just wrapping up this year was a 20% increase over the previous year. So going forward, if they enact a 6 or 8% increase, that's still a big increase in spending. The Senator Linda Wilson, who's the lead Democrat on this issue, she pointed out there was absolutely zero justification for new taxes of any kind. So that's a strong leadership position from the Republicans, saying the state is healthy, lots of revenue is coming in, there's no reason to have a tax increase. We'll see how the budget comes out. Of course, we have argued for tax relief. 49 states have cut taxes in some way, including states like California, Illinois, New York. New Mexico just passed tax relief for their citizens. These states are all governed by Democrats. Our point is, why can't people in Washington state benefit from that as well? And we'll see what happens. The other discipline is the budget has to be written with a 4-year budget outlook, and it must balance over that period of time. This is a limitation on budget writers, that they cannot just go, the sky's the limit. They have to stay within that 4-year budget outlook. And that was a Washington Policy Center reform that was enacted a few years ago. So we like seeing that discipline in place. It will hopefully moderate spending increases in the future. The next budget news is Senate Democrats announced their budget on Thursday. So they're taking those revenue numbers and plugging them into the spending plan for the next 2 years. They propose a spending increase to $68.9 billion. That's about an 8% increase. Matches almost exactly with what the revenue forecast was. So they're essentially spending every dollar that they expect to come in. They also include, kind of humorously, a Medicaid gimmick, which is the state applies a tax called a Hospital Safety Net Assessment on hospitals. The hospitals then turn around and charge that tax to the federal government through Medicaid. And that's just a way of sucking revenue through this kind of scheme out of the federal treasury into the state treasury. Everybody understands what this is. It's open. There isn't even anything sneaky about it. Other states do it. Congress knows about it. They have not closed this loophole. And so the Democrats have decided to take advantage of it. So that's one item in the budget. The House Democrats will announce their budget version on Monday. The governor had proposed his budget, which was ambitious back in December, and Democrats and Republicans said that budget is a non-starter. So now we are seeing real budget proposals come out. The last thing about the Senate budget is that I think it's going to gain bipartisan support. It has no new taxes in it. It has some budget provisos, which we like, on emergency reform and creating a tax transparency website. And what that means is some policy ideas that have been put into the budget. If the governor signs them, then those ideas will go into effect. And people will be able to look up their tax burden online, and will provide some reasonable limit on the governor's emergency powers. And those are good reforms that have now been included in the budget. We'll see what happens there. Next item is the upcoming ban on the sale of gas-powered cars in our state. Governor Inslee has announced, as he puts it, we must mobilize our economy to net zero transition, meaning all renewable energy, electric vehicles in our state. And the deadline for that is the year 2035. The sale of gas-powered cars will be illegal in Washington state after that date. What Todd Myers on our staff did was compare that claim to the actual goals that the governor has set for the state purchasing electric vehicles. The governor said that 50% of state-owned vehicles would be electric by the year 2021. The actual number is closer to 20% today, so they missed that goal. He even looked up what the Department of Ecology had added to their vehicle fleet, and the Department of Ecology itself this last year bought 4 Dodge Ram pickup trucks, which are gas-powered, for their own fleet. So they're nowhere close to meeting this goal, and this is a goal that the governor set for himself. So Todd's point is, how can we respect something that the governor is trying to impose on all of us when he's not even following those same standards himself? And we'll see how that plays out. We checked the numbers, and today 10% of the cars driven in Washington state now are electric vehicles, and yet we have this ban on gas-powered cars coming up in the future. Next, the last item is some good news for Washington state students that will protect local school districts from interference by the state. There was a bill, SB 5237, that was proposed earlier in the session. This is a Democrat bill that would cut a school district's budget by 20% if state officials had determined that that school district was not implementing critical race theory in the classroom or other radical racist ideas. Naturally, many school districts resist that. They want to focus on academics. This bill would punish any school district that didn't go in that direction. Lee Finna, our education expert, wrote a legislative memo on this. She did an analysis of the bill. We distributed that in February. It went to all lawmakers, all staff, media, and then we also sent it to the general public all across the state. So everybody got the same plain English analysis of what this bill did. We just learned in the last few days that the bill died in committee. So it did not make the cutoff dates, and we're confident that the 20% cut for school districts is not going to happen, and that the bill died. And Lee's comment was, she sort of smiled and said, I think our headline alone probably killed this bill. And that's what Washington Policy Center does, is we take complicated legislation, we look for the bottom line, what is the maximum impact on the people of our state, and then we put that information in a headline or a few bullet points backed up by factual analysis. And that's what I think is why our publications are so respected in Olympia. Lawmakers know, even when they disagree with us, that our facts are going to be right. And in this case, it was, I think, instrumental in causing this bad idea to not get out of committee. So that's the last item for this week. And as usual, on Tuesday, March 28th, we have our live on-the-go show. It's about an hour at noon, in which our experts will be talking about different policy issues in the legislature. And as always, we want to extend a thank you to all of our supporters across the state. Washington Policy Center has thousands of members, and it's your support that really makes our independent work possible, and we appreciate that as we do our work every day. And with that, I will be back with another update next week. Thanks.